Reacting to some new baptism trend data right now on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, good to see you today as we record this episode. Welcome back, you for our listeners who never knew you were gone. You were it was a quick trip. You were in Madrid, working with a church in Madrid. We've got a one of our guides trained up in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Should be working with churches in Europe, but we do, even with our guides here domestically, we do sort of OJT, some on-the-job training, where we want to job shadow you and make sure you're going through the process the way that needs to be done, and to give you some confidence, to kind of have that crutch to lean on, so to speak, to have us in the room. And so you were doing that as she was working with a church in Madrid. So this is here at the front of the episode, maybe just a good opportunity to promote two things. One, that you can support the work that we do with churches internationally by going to malfersgroup.com/donate. That helps us to support churches all across the globe, which we do outside of North America at no cost to them. It's not at no cost. It costs a lot, but it's at no cost to them. So we really appreciate the donor support in doing that work. And it's also a good opportunity to promote our guide training. So if you want to work with churches, do consulting work with churches using our processes, you can go to malfersgroup.com/certification. We have an event coming up April 8th through the 10th, hosted right here in Bristol, Tennessee. And if you want to know more about what would that be a good fit for me, you should go back and listen to last week's episode, where we spent a long time talking about that.
Unfortunately, that really is for North America only. While we do have guides in Europe, and we're breaking ground in Africa, in some African countries, we're just not really set up for that. Those are kind of those are a little bit more invitation only. But yeah, for North America, United States, and Canada, sign up. We need more. We need more of you.
Yeah, outside of the U.S., it's just a lot more involved. Like we need to rely on kind of networks to facilitate our relationships with churches and means of partnering together to raise support, because it really is a missionary endeavor. So it's just a more involved process in scaling that. So yes, but in terms, if you're here in the U.S. Or in Canada, and you want to be working with churches in North America, kind of building your own consulting ministry, you should go to malfersgroup.com/certification and look at joining us for that event in April. Okay. With that out of the way, or covered, today's a reaction episode. So we are reacting to some new data that we came across, kind of floated across the wire within the last month. And I looked at it and I thought, this looks like some good news. And then as we dove into it, maybe the news is not as good as
I'm throwing a wet blanket on this data. I don't know. There's a celebration to be had, but yeah, right. So this is an episode where we kind of want to cover some data that has come, like I said, kind of across the wire, relevant specifically to Southern Baptist churches. Listen, if you work at the denominational level in a church that's not an SBC church, hey, please get as good as the Baptists are at reporting their data. We would love to cover your data too, but the Baptists are pretty good about posting this stuff, and I think it paints a picture for all churches, even for non-SBC churches. I think the trends are going to overlay to some degree across all
evangelical churches. Would you say that's true?
I would say, yeah, I think it's a reflection of the culture in the United States. And so, I mean, a lot of you are listening or watching in other parts of the world. And so are you thinking, well, this is not relevant to me? I would say there's relevance to you. We don't have your data, but while there are pockets of church growth happening in various places around the world, there's also a lot of places around the world continuing to experience church decline. And
Mhm.
and so I think, while the hard numbers aren't your numbers, the implication is similar that
Yeah.
that the church is in decline. And we're specifically going to be talking about baptism numbers and a little bit of attendance information. But if you're
Yep.
in a part of the world in which cultural Christianity has been on decline for decades, maybe,
Mm.
you probably, if you have the data for your area, probably baptisms have declined. And you know what? So kind of to start this off, Scott, I just want to let's kind of bring something to the level of consciousness that I think is important,
Okay.
because we get this kind of information, and we have words like attendance and baptism, and then we've got numbers, we got dates, we got percentages, and all this stuff. These are
Okay.
people. These are people.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, so which is kind of, let's start off with some of the good news that there was an increase from 2021 and 2022. More people were baptized. Those are saved souls, and there was rejoicing in heaven with every one of them, and we rejoice with them
Mm.
today too.
Yeah.
Um,
Amen.
so let's just not lose sight of that whenever we talk. We use these big trend lines and data things. I mean, people's lives are affected by this, and we should be wanting these numbers to be huge. And unfortunately, they're not. So, yeah. So that being said, I don't know. You want to talk for a second more about maybe the positive side of this?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a step back. So, the data we're covering comes from Lifeway Research, which is sort of the research arm of the Southern Baptists here in the U.S. And these numbers we're getting as of it came out kind of late January 2024. They are giving the numbers for 2022, so the numbers kind of run a year behind. So just so you know, if you hear us talking about 2022 numbers, I know that wasn't last year, but I think that's just how the numbers report. It takes them, I think, that long to just process um, all of the data that they collect from the churches. So, um, with that being said, there was an increase. Maybe the good news is when you look at baptisms, there was an increase in baptisms in 2021 versus 2020, and there was an increase in 2022 from 2021. And so those are good things to see increases versus seeing a decrease. However, the broader context is it's still way, way, way down from where things have been historically. So, for some historical context, um, in the year 2000, so 22 years ago from our latest data point here, there were 414, 657 baptisms. And that was the last time that the totals were above 400,000. Um, in 2022, our latest year that we have data for, it was 180,000. So more than or less than half of what it was just 20 some years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big decline. And we're down even from just 2019, so before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to look at this in the chart, and we'll post the chart, we can put the chart, I think, in the show notes today. If you were to look at the chart, you see this massive decline, like this huge spike down because of COVID in 2020. And then you see essentially what appears to be a slight recovery in 21 and 22. But
Mm-hmm.
your point, AJ, and I think it's a good one, it's a valid one, is that where you see that point on the graph today in 2022, again, which is our most recent numbers that came out in January this year, appears to be more of just a continuation of that decline line from 20, like if you were to just draw a straight line from where we were in 2019, it just seems to be still a decline.
Yeah.
And
Maybe even a little bit lower. If
maybe
COVID
even
had
a
never
little,
happened, my point is we probably would be at the same number.
right. So we have this huge drop off because of the pandemic. And for all the practical reasons, people just weren't doing baptisms and all of that. And so
Yeah.
it makes sense that there has been some recovery and that we should celebrate that, like that there was a recovery that didn't have to happen. Like
Yeah. Right.
that wasn't inevitable that it would happen. It's
Yeah.
good that it did. But we haven't even you can't call it a recovery. You can't say we've reversed the decline really, unless we were to see a longer term trend over 4 or 5 years that
Hmm.
sees us surpass 2019 levels. But we haven't even hit pre-pandemic levels of baptisms, much
Right.
less, you know, truly recovering to where we were 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I don't know if they have this as exact. I think from 2020 to 2021, I think that increase was more than 21 to 22. So the rebound, I think, when we have 2 years of data, slowed down in year two than it did in year one.
Right.
Doesn't
Which isn't a
necessarily.
great sign. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's there are some other numbers. So that's just the overall broader trend is, hey, things have rebounded. So the good news would be it's rebounded from the pandemic. The bad news is it's still an overall decline. Like that's not, you can't just look at the last 3 years in isolation. You need to look at the broader chart, and
Hmm.
it's not a pretty chart. But there are some other, I think, pieces of data that were included in this report that paint a picture that's interesting. So I wanted to not just talk about the overall trend, but maybe pick on some of these more nuanced uh, data points. The first one, AJ, that jumped out to me uh, is the fact that, and it's a little depressing, and is a motivation for why we do what we do. But in 2022, 43% of the reporting churches had no
Mm.
baptisms at all.
That, even as bad as these charts look, Scott, that is a surprising number to me.
Yeah, like not
Shocking.
even a kid, not even like someone's kid.
How, I just don't get that. 43% of churches, Southern Baptist churches in
Wait a minute, hold
2022.
on. You do the same work I do. You're telling me this, you can't believe it that there. I can, I can believe it. It's depressing, and it makes me glad we do what we do because we see this stuff change. But
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me.
Man, I don't know. Maybe maybe my head is just buried, in the work and I'm just not absorbing that. But this,
Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and in the report, it just says 43%. It should state the truth of it, which is almost half.
Hmm.
Almost half of Southern Baptist churches in 2022 reported no baptisms at all.
Wow,
Um,
man. So compare that to the average baptisms per church at 5.4 people.
yeah.
5.4 people.
Yeah.
Which is down 2.5% since 2017, where it was at 7.9. So
Right. So the I think that those numbers, AJ, is that the overall number or is that the
I think so.
100 members? So they use the article makes a good point about trying to normalize, like to create a normalization and so that you don't, I mean, obviously bigger churches are going to
Yeah.
have baptized more people.
Hmm.
Smaller churches will have baptized fewer people. So you want to use that baptisms per 100 act. It's not per 100 members, it's per 100 in average worship attendance. So, I think but there's some overall numbers just like on raw numbers and in 43% of churches didn't baptize anybody.
Hmm.
34% baptized 1 to 5 people. And 9% saw 6 to 9 baptisms, 13%. This math isn't mathing, AJ. I feel like I must be missing some key point because that math doesn't math. That doesn't add up to 100. That adds up
Oh,
to
yeah, I think that stat is missing the church size metric. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we won't focus in on those. So,
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. I found the context. This has to do with that adjusted for attendance. So, 34% had 0 baptisms per 100 attendees. So when you start accounting for church size, it shifts these averages a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
So 34% had 0 baptisms per 100 attendees. Another 30% or so, 32% averaged 0 to 5 baptisms, or 1 to 5 per 100. Actually, it says averaged more than 0.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's
More
going to
than
be,
0, but less than 1. Yeah. That
yeah,
makes sense.
more than 0
Hmm.
to 5 baptisms per 100. So there you go. You've got 66%, 2/3 of churches baptized 5 or fewer people per 100 attendees,
Okay. Yeah.
which is not great.
Hmm.
More than 1 in 5 churches, that's 20%. 20% averaged more than 5 to 10, and 13% averaged 10 baptisms per 100 attendees. So you got 13, you have a third. 2/3 of the church are very evangelistically ineffective, and a third are more effective, with basically 10%, 13% being highly effective in evangelism, which I that tracks, right?
Yeah.
Does it not? With just looking around,
Yeah.
90% of the churches are not doing much.
That's right. Yeah.
Uh,
They're declining. The searches are declining. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Now there's about 20% that they have families. And so when you see, you know, a handful of baptisms a year, that's kids that are involved, I think, in the children's ministry making decisions. And I don't want to discredit that. That's
The,
really important.
right. Those, they count.
Yes, it has to start. Yeah, they count, and it has to start there. I mean,
Yeah.
if we can't reach our own kids, what are we even doing? But
Hmm.
um, in terms of really making a kingdom impact and transforming our communities, it has to go beyond that. Like that's to me, that's the baseline. That's the starting point.
Yeah.
We got to go beyond that in reaching people. And there's just maybe 10% of churches or so that are really doing that.
What do you make of look at that next one there on the urban versus rural? That's kind of interesting to me. Urban churches average 8.6 baptisms, suburban ones 5.5, and rural 3.1.
I mean, is
I
this not
wonder,
just a byproduct of the fact that, oh, and those numbers, by the way, are per 100
yeah.
attendees.
So more evangelism happening in the urban
I
churches?
mean, is this not just a byproduct of the fact that there are more people?
Do you think it's just a population density thing?
It has to be at least a significant contributing factor, right? There are more people to reach.
43% of them aren't reaching anybody, apparently. So, uh, regardless of where they are, maybe that breaks down as well. But I don't know. I don't know.
I, I
Are
mean,
more churches being planted in urban environments than they are in suburban or rural? I wonder,
well,
because
that's
church
probably,
planting usually has higher increase of, uh,
yeah. Okay, so let's break that down. All right, there are a few things that seem to indicate more evangelistic effectiveness. One would be whether or not you're urban or rural, and that's a sliding scale. So you baptize more people if you're urban than if you're suburban than if you're rural. You're also more likely to baptize more people the newer or the younger the church is. Not younger
Yeah.
in necessarily in terms of demographics, but although that's probably true too. But just younger in terms of overall age, and that includes churches that are also really old. So there's a data point in here that's like, if your church was started before 1900, you're the least evangelistically effective. If the church has been started since 2000, it's the most evangelistically effective. And there's a couple of time slots in between. And the older the church is,
That is so weird to
um,
me.
yeah,
Yeah, you and I have both worked with churches, some of them dating back hundreds of years, because we've worked with churches in like the East Coast of the US that, like the founding fathers might have attended. But um, I can't, I don't think if anybody just said, "Hey, what do you think? What's your impression of like the evangelistic nature of churches from 1950 versus 1850?" In my experience, I would not have been able to differentiate those.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking on such a marginal level, though. I mean, so churches between that were founded between 1950 and 1999 averaged 5.8 baptisms per 100 attendees,
Yeah,
and
it's
those
not
that started before
significantly different,
1900, it's 4.9. I mean, it's
but it's
it's
still
less than
there.
one.
I just can't figure
Yeah.
out what the commonality would be that would drive that trend at all. I don't know.
I mean, I guess I would say there's more stuff in their discipleship garage that's cluttering decision making, and they're more
I I
intransigent, and they're
guess.
yeah. Yeah, but
There's
as far
certainly
as,
some.
okay, so there's an age of the church thing. There's
Uh-huh.
a urban rural thing. There's also a regional difference.
Yeah.
So places where people are more hostile to the gospel, or what you would assume to be. So like the West and the Northeast,
Hmm.
they're more effective in evangelism than places like the Midwest and the South.
Yeah.
So I don't know. To me, it feels like, oh, here's the thing. The harder the environment, the better you are at evangelism.
Mhm. I think that speaks to intentionality. I think that speaks to vision. I think that speaks to mission alignment. I think those church planters intentionally, they know the environment they're going into and they're
Well, and
working
they
on
have
it.
to. It's like
That's
do
right.
or die. We have to
Yeah.
reach people, or you know,
Yeah.
um, or we're not going to make it. Um,
I think at least subconsciously, there are parts of the country that have become maybe a little cavalier and or unintentional for sure. Um, I mean, we see kind of the attitude of leaders in churches in different places that we go, and I'm not that every church in the Bible Belt is totally not doing anything. Some of them are amazing, but we have gone into churches though, Scott. Don't you agree? In which just okay, we're not really trying that hard.
yeah, totally. And I think comfort is such a huge it's a huge discussion that comes up in almost every church that I talk to that's in this situation. They go, we're just comfortable.
Hmm.
And they maybe have some story. And again, every church's past is a little bit different, but they maybe have some story about some conflict that happened in the church, or some split that happened in the church, or there's some history. And the people that stayed, to some degree, stayed because it was too inconvenient to leave.
Hmm.
So you have this culture of people who stuck around. Some people stick around because they want to be change agents and they want to see positive. I don't want to, those are often the people who are sitting there working with us. But there are a lot of people who end up just sticking around because they're like, I don't want to find another place. I don't want to find another church.
Yeah.
And that's too hard. And this value of comfort and preserving the status quo, it
Hmm.
just seeks in, and it's a virus that
Hmm.
infects a church.
Hmm.
And you're less likely to see that if you're in a culture where there are no cultural incentives to to go to church out of routine. If you're in the Northeast, you're going to be culturally rewarded for going to brunch, not to church.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, yeah.
it's a
And
different vibe.
I think it's real easy to, in some of these parts in the country, you're just kind of surrounded by Christianity, and it begins to make you think this is my entire area, when in fact it's just your circle. Like
Yeah.
all my friends are believers. The the car wash sign down there frequently says, pray, or they put a Bible verse on it. When I go to the grocery store, I pass that business that always has Bible verses out. And it's just kind of like, you know what? Yeah, we're all Christians and
Right.
love my church, family, we do our thing. It's so great. And I think it's easy to just get kind of lulled into thinking the whole world are Christ followers. And
Yeah.
no, your small world is maybe, but the whole world's not.
Maybe. Yeah. We just get complacent. And I think we have moments in time where we realize, oh, yeah, when you get kind of like just even in your own place where you live,
Mhm.
get out of your circle for 5 seconds and you realize, oh, this isn't my experience isn't everyone's experience.
Yeah,
Um,
man,
you know,
read some comments on social media. There's a lot
yeah,
of people out there that don't know the Lord.
yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, just walk around the grocery store, get your eyes off your grocery list and the shelves and look at the people who are in there. And I'm not saying it's from a judgmental perspective. I'm saying you'll notice there are people who are living a different life and having different struggles and different
Mhm.
challenges and different feelings. Go to your kids' school. You probably aren't allowed to, but go to a sporting event, go to a football game or a basketball game or something. Go somewhere where you're going to interface with people you're not normally around, and you will see all kinds of things that will tell you, oh man, even here in my rural community or in my suburban community, we are not surrounded by this Christian bubble. There's a need for the gospel, and you don't feel it because you're insulated from it. And I think that yes, if you are in an urban environment or your church is you know you're a church plant, and so you have that kind of more in your DNA, or you are in the northeast of the U.S. or in the west in the U.S. where there's almost cultural oppression against Christianity, you just don't feel those things, and so it causes you to act and behave differently.
Mhm.
Um, and so you know, it's no secret that this is why the church in China is thriving and in these closed places. It's
Yeah.
um
All right. Well, there you go. We're going to have in today's article, there'll be a link to this article.
oh, hey, sorry,
Yeah.
before we wrap this up, and I do want to react to one other piece of data here,
Okay.
which is that um churches with less than 25% group participation,
Mm.
meaning less than 25% of the average worship attendance is engaged in a group, were the most likely to have zero baptisms.
Mm. That's a
Oh,
significant
that's
one
a
to
full
consider.
50%.
Yeah.
While higher group participation did not necessarily correlate with more baptisms, low group participation did correlate to no baptisms.
I don't understand how the inverse wouldn't be true, but okay, I'm not a statistician.
And neither am I. I'm trusting that the people at Lifeway Research, I'm trusting that they are. They are saying that
Hopefully.
they're just because you have high group participation doesn't mean you will have high baptisms. But if you have
Low.
low group participation, it
You're
does mean
you're more likely to have
you're likely to
less
have
or zero.
less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which that tracks too. It's like, all right,
You can
if we
extrapolate that.
are
Yeah.
right, if we work with churches all the time that have high like Sunday school or small group participation, but they're not evangelistic.
Yeah.
Um, but the ones that have low group participation
Hmm.
are definitely not evangelistic.
Mm, yeah.
So
That's
that
a kind of maybe a good way of saying it to kind of explain the data. Yeah.
yeah,
That's right.
you got no chance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's more of what they're saying. the chances are way more likely with active, good discipleship, fellowship ministries happening in the church where people are connected and maturing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So whereas if you're like, well, no, people just come on Sunday morning and they leave, you can't expect that to lead to a flourishing community that has evangelism. That's not going to happen.
Right. Okay, man. All right. So there you go. You can check out the article for yourself and see what you think. And we'd love to hear from you. Again, other parts of the world and people outside the SBC. We always love getting your comments.
Yeah. What
over
are you
there.
seeing? What are you seeing in
Yeah.
your, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you would say, no,
Similar
this isn't
numbers.
true. Or we're
And
seeing some good
if
good
you've
stuff
got
happen.
data, I mean, if you're in a denomination or just an area that has some data like this, we would love to get that. You can email it to us, leadership@malfirstgroup.com, because we are working globally. And sometimes that's one of the challenges, is being able to get as much data as we can get in the United States, to help church leaders make good decisions in those churches around the world. By the way, Scott, when we talked at the top of the show about the work outside the U.S., just, I mean, to pique your interest a little bit, places coming up like Germany, Spain again. We're talking with pastors in Vietnam and Thailand, Argentina, in Africa, Tanzania, Burundi, and others. These are just some of the things that are either already in the works and need to become funded, or we're in significant conversations with, and going to be leaning on you guys to make that happen. So make sure you go over to malfirstgroup.com/donate, or email me at leadership@malfirstgroup.com, because we need to raise a lot of money to make these trips happen. And we're trying to do the greatest work we can, but we need your partnership. Then if you're interested in guide certification, go to malfirstgroup.com/certification. You can begin the phase 1 application there, and we will be continuing to review those, leading up to our next guide training on April 8th through the 10th in beautiful East Tennessee. We'd love to have you there, but there's a lead up to that, some training that happens. So don't wait. If you're interested in that, get your applications in so that we can get you into the pipeline to make that happen. Thanks for being with us, everybody. We love you guys. See you next week.